June 12, 1944. Yokosuka Naval Air Station, Japan. The afternoon sun glinted off the aluminum skin of the strange aircraft that sat on the tarmac, its sleek silhouette utterly foreign to the assembled pilots of the Imperial Japanese Navy. Captain Minoru Genda, one of Japan's most brilliant tactical minds and a key planner of the Pearl Harbor operation, approached the captured American fighter with confidence. "This American machine cannot possibly match our nimble Zero," he remarked to his colleagues. "Once we understand its weaknesses, our pilots will exploit them mercilessly." The officers nodded in agreement, utterly convinced of their technological and spiritual superiority. None could have imagined how this single aircraft would forever change their understanding of modern aerial warfare. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the untold story of how a small group of Japanese aviation experts came face to face with the machine that would help devastate their air force, and how their subsequent revelation about American industrial might and engineering prowess forced them to confront a brutal truth, that no amount of courage, tradition, or sacrifice could overcome the unstoppable wave of technological superiority now bearing down upon their homeland. The aircraft that sat before the Japanese evaluation team that summer day was no ordinary prize of war. It was a North American P-51 Mustang, one of the most formidable fighters ever created, though at this early stage of its deployment, its full potential remained unrealized even to its American creators. This particular aircraft had been recovered relatively intact after an emergency landing on a Japanese-held island in the Pacific. The American pilot had been captured, but his aircraft represented an intelligence opportunity too valuable to ignore. Lieutenant Toshio Sakagawa, the lead technical officer assigned to the evaluation team, circled the aircraft with measured steps, his notebook already filling with observations. "Notice the streamlining," he said to his colleagues, running his hand along the aircraft's smooth contours. "The Americans have eliminated nearly all unnecessary protrusions. Even the radiator intake is designed for minimal drag." Commander Yasuhiro Nakajima, head of the evaluation team and a respected test pilot, nodded thoughtfully. "Their metallurgy has improved significantly since the early models we encountered in 1942. The skin is smoother, the riveting more precise. What made this evaluation particularly significant was the composition of the team. These weren't merely mechanics or engineers. They represented the elite of Japanese aviation. Nakajima had logged over 3,000 flight hours in 27 different aircraft types. Sakagawa had studied aircraft design at Tokyo Imperial University and spent a year observing German aircraft production before the war. Captain Genda was perhaps Japan's most forward-thinking naval air tactician. Also present was Lieutenant Saburo Sakai, one of Japan's leading aces with 64 confirmed aerial victories, who had been temporarily recalled from combat duties to offer his perspective as a frontline pilot. His experience fighting against American aircraft made his insights particularly valuable. The Japanese aviation industry had produced approximately 11,000 aircraft in 1943. In comparison, American factories had rolled out an astonishing 86,000 aircraft that same year, nearly 8 times Japan's output. These numbers remained unknown to the evaluation team, but the quality of craftsmanship before them hinted at a manufacturing capability beyond anything they had imagined. "The build quality is exceptional," Sakagawa noted, examining the control surfaces. "The tolerances are tighter than our production standards. See how precisely these panels align." Sakai, less interested in technical details than combat performance, impatiently asked, "How fast is it? How high can it climb? What is its turning radius? These are what matter in combat." Nakajima consulted his notes. According to intelligence reports, the P-51 can reach speeds of approximately 420 miles per hour at 25,000 feet. Its service ceiling is believed to be around 42,000 feet. This information drew murmurs from the assembled officers. The Mitsubishi A6M-0, Japan's premier fighter, could achieve only 331 miles per hour at 19,000 feet. Its service ceiling was approximately 33,000 feet. The American fighter was dramatically faster and could operate much higher, but this was only part of the story. "Remember, gentlemen, the Zero can outmaneuver any American fighter," Sakai interjected. "Superior speed means nothing if they cannot follow us in a turn." The team began a methodical examination of the aircraft's exterior before moving to its internal systems. Every component was photographed, measured, and compared to Japanese equivalents. The attention to detail was extraordinary, from the thickness of the aluminum skin to the diameter of hydraulic lines. The most revealing moment came when they opened the cowling to examine the engine. The Mustang before them was equipped with a Packard V1710, an American-built version of the British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. The massive power plant, with its 12 cylinders arranged in a V configuration, dwarfed the 14-cylinder Sakai radial engine that powered the Zero. 1,400 horsepower, Sakagawa whispered, reading from the engine data plate. "Nearly double the output of our Sakai engine." Captain Gender leaned in closer. "And look at the supercharger, two-stage, intercooled. This is why it maintains power at high altitude when our engines lose their effectiveness." For Nakajima, who understood the implications most clearly, the moment was sobering. "Gentlemen, this engine represents industrial capacity we cannot match. The precision machining, the alloys used, the complexity of the supercharger, these require manufacturing capabilities beyond our current resources." The Japanese aviation industry relied heavily on skilled craftsmen working with relatively simple tools. American aircraft production had evolved into a highly automated process using specialized machine tools operated by workers who needed minimal training. Where Japan might require a master machinist with 15 years of experience to produce certain engine components, America could train a factory worker in weeks to operate the machines that produce the same parts with greater precision and at 20 times the rate. This fundamental difference in industrial philosophy became increasingly apparent as the evaluation continued. The Japanese team discovered that nearly every component of the Mustang was designed for mass production. Parts were standardized, interchangeable, and often attached with identical fasteners to simplify assembly. Even the wiring harnesses were color-coded and equipped with quick-connect plugs rather than the hand-soldered connections used in Japanese aircraft. "Look at the instrument panel," Nakajima pointed out. "Every gauge is produced to the same standard. The glass, the bezels, the indicator needles, all identical in manufacturing quality. This is not the work of individual craftsmen. This is the product of industrial machinery operating at a scale we have never achieved." As the day progressed, the team moved to the aircraft's armament. The 650 caliber Browning machine guns mounted in the wings represented firepower that outmatched the Zero's two 20mm cannons and two 7.7mm machine guns. More importantly, the ammunition capacity for each gun was significantly greater than that carried by Japanese fighters. 500 rounds per gun, Sakagawa calculated, 3,000 rounds total. Our pilots typically have 60 rounds for each cannon and 500 for each machine gun. The American pilot can sustain fire much longer during an engagement. Lieutenant Sakai, who had survived numerous encounters with American aircraft, nodded grimly. "I have witnessed this. When we believe they must surely be out of ammunition, they continue firing. It forces us to break off attacks prematurely." The most significant revelation came when they examined the Mustang's fuel system. The internal wing tanks and fuselage tank gave the P-51 an impressive range on its own, but the attachment points for external drop tanks revealed the true strategic impact of the aircraft. "With these auxiliary tanks," Nakajima explained, "the Mustang can escort bombers all the way to the Japanese mainland from Iwo Jima or Saipan. No other fighter in existence has this capability." This assessment proved prescient. By early 1945, Mustangs would indeed be escorting B-29 bombers all the way to Tokyo, eliminating the safe haven that distance had previously provided. The team worked until sunset, documenting every aspect of the aircraft. As lanterns were brought out to continue the work into the evening, Captain Gender called the senior officers aside for a private conversation. "What are your conclusions, gentlemen?" he asked, his voice low to prevent others from overhearing. Nakajima spoke first. The aircraft represents a level of industrial capability that exceeds our own by a considerable margin. Its performance advantages, speed, altitude, range, cannot be overcome with our current technology. Sakagawa added, even if we had the design plans for this aircraft today, our factories could not produce it in meaningful numbers. We lack the machine tools, the raw materials, and the production systems. Sakai, ever the pragmatic combat pilot, offered a different perspective. Our pilots can still outfly the Americans. Our training remains superior. If we adapt our tactics to account for their advantages in speed and diving power, Genda interrupted him gently. Sakai, how many hours of flight training did you receive before entering combat? 500 hours, Sakai replied proudly. And how many do we provide to new pilots now? Sakai's expression darkened. As few as 120. Fuel restrictions make more training impossible. Meanwhile, Genda continued, we have intelligence suggesting American pilots receive 200 hours at minimum, with fuel usage unrestricted during training. They practice gunnery with live ammunition, while our pilots must simulate firing to conserve bullets. The implications hung heavily in the air between them. Japan's initial advantage, superbly trained pilots flying maneuverable aircraft, was evaporating as veteran pilots were lost and inadequately trained replacements faced increasingly superior American equipment. The next morning, the team continued their evaluation by examining the Mustang's cockpit and control systems. Here, too, they found evidence of American industrial capability that left them deeply concerned. The control column is a single piece of machined aluminum, Sakagawa noted. Ours are assembled from multiple components. This is stronger and requires fewer man-hours to produce. Nakajima settled into the cockpit, running his hands over the controls. The ergonomics are excellent, all critical controls within easy reach. The visibility. He paused, looking through the expansive canopy. It is superior to anything in our inventory. The Zero, for all its maneuverability, had relatively poor visibility to the rear, a critical weakness in combat. The Mustang's bubble canopy provided the pilot with a nearly unobstructed view in all directions. Even more telling was the radio equipment. The Mustang's VHF radio system was more powerful, more reliable, and more resistant to interference than anything available to Japanese pilots. Many Japanese fighters still operated with rudimentary radio systems, or in some cases, no radio at all. Their pilots can coordinate attacks effectively, Sakai observed. Our pilots often fight as individuals because communication is so difficult. As the evaluation continued into its second day, the team began disassembling key components to understand their construction in greater detail. The landing gear, the control surfaces, the oxygen system, each revealed the same story of industrial capability and resource abundance that Japan simply could not match. By mid-afternoon, the team had accumulated enough data to begin drafting their official report. Nakajima called a meeting in a nearby administrative building, away from the aircraft and the enlisted personnel, who continued to catalogue its components. Before we formalize our findings, Nakajima began, I want each of you to speak freely. What are your personal assessments of this aircraft and its implications for our air defense? Sakagawa spoke first, consulting his detailed notes. The P-51 represents a generational advance over our current fighters. Its performance envelope exceeds our aircraft in almost every measurable category, except turning radius at low speeds. More concerning is what it represents industrially. This aircraft contains approximately 80,000 individual parts, each manufactured to precise specifications. Our most advanced fighter, the Zero, contains approximately 30,000 parts. The level of industrial output required to produce such complex machines in quantity is, he hesitated, beyond our current capabilities. Lieutenant Commander Takeo Yamada, who had been largely silent during the evaluation, spoke next. As the team's intelligence officer, his perspective encompassed broader strategic considerations. Our sources in America have provided production figures that are difficult to believe, but the evidence before us supports their accuracy. The Americans began this war with approximately 3,500 military aircraft. They now produce that many every 30 days. The factory that builds this Mustang, North American Aviation, reportedly completes one aircraft every 20 minutes at peak production. The room fell silent as the officers processed this information, 20 minutes per aircraft. The implications were staggering. Japan's most efficient aircraft factory, the Mitsubishi plant at Nagoya, required approximately 25,000 man-hours to complete a single Zero fighter. Sakai, visibly frustrated, interjected, "Machines do not win wars, men win wars. The spirit of our pilots cannot stop bullets," Gender finished softly. "Sakai, I value the warrior spirit as much as any man, but we must be realistic. If the Americans can place 10 aircraft against each of ours, with each of their aircraft superior in speed, firepower, protection and range, what becomes of spirit then?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable. Nakajima refocused the discussion. "Let us address specific technical aspects. The Mustang's fuel system is of particular concern. With external tanks, its combat radius exceeds 650 miles. This means American fighters can now escort their bombers to any target within Japan. The strategic implications were profound. Until now, Japanese air defense strategy had been built around the assumption that American bombers would be vulnerable once they flew beyond the range of their escort fighters. That assumption was now invalidated. "There is another matter we have not yet discussed," Yamada added, "the psychological impact on our pilots. Many still believe they fly the world's finest fighter aircraft. When they discover the performance gap is this substantial and growing." He didn't need to finish the thought. Morale among Japanese pilots was already suffering as casualties mounted, and replacement pilots arrived with increasingly inadequate training. As the meeting continued, the officers debated potential countermeasures. Could Japanese aircraft designs be improved quickly enough to narrow the gap? Could tactics be developed to neutralize the Mustang's advantages? Could production be increased to offset the numerical disadvantage? Each question led to the same uncomfortable conclusion. Japan's aircraft industry had reached its maximum potential given the available resources, while America's production was still accelerating. "We must consider the possibility," Gender said carefully, "that air superiority may be permanently lost unless dramatic changes occur in our industrial capability or resource availability." This assessment, coming from one of Japan's most respected air tacticians, carried tremendous weight. The room fell silent again. Nakajima finally spoke. "Our report must be factual and specific, but we must also convey these broader implications to Imperial headquarters. They must understand what we are facing." The officers worked through the evening, drafting a comprehensive evaluation of the P-51 Mustang. The report detailed its technical specifications, performance capabilities, and construction methods. It included comparisons with Japanese aircraft and projections of how the performance gap would likely widen as newer American models entered service. The most challenging section was the strategic assessment. How could they honestly convey the gravity of the situation without appearing defeatist? In a military culture where suggesting anything less than inevitable victory could be seen as treasonous, their words had to be chosen carefully. The report was completed shortly before midnight. As the officers reviewed the final draft, Nakajima added a personal observation as the concluding paragraph. "The P-51 Mustang represents not merely an advanced aircraft, but a fundamentally different approach to aerial warfare, one based on industrial mass production of high-quality, high-performance machines operated by adequately trained pilots. This approach stands in contrast to our strategy of producing limited numbers of lighter, more maneuverable aircraft flown by exceptionally skilled pilots. The evidence suggests that as the conflict progresses, the former approach will increasingly prevail over the latter." The following morning, the evaluation team held a demonstration for senior officers from Imperial Japanese Navy and Army Air Forces. The captured Mustang could not be flown. Critical components had been damaged during its capture, but a comprehensive technical briefing was provided. Admiral Koshiro Oikawa, a senior naval air commander, asked the question that many were thinking, but few had voiced. "Given what you have learned, what aircraft should we be developing now to counter this threat?" Nakajima exchanged glances with his colleagues before responding carefully. Admiral, with respect, the issue is not merely one of aircraft design, but of industrial capacity. Even if we created a superior design tomorrow, our factories could not produce it in sufficient numbers with our current resources and manufacturing methods. The Admiral's expression darkened. Are you suggesting we cannot compete technologically? No, Admiral, Nakajima clarified. I am suggesting that technology alone is not the determining factor. It is the integration of technology with mass production that creates the advantage we are now witnessing. This assessment proved prophetic. By late 1944, Japan had indeed developed several advanced fighter designs, including the Kawanishi N1KJ Shiden and the Nakajima Ki-84 Hayate, both of which could theoretically match or exceed the Mustang's performance in certain aspects. But these aircraft were produced in quantities measured in the hundreds, while Mustang production exceeded 15,000 by war's end. As the demonstration concluded and the officers dispersed, Lieutenant Sakai approached Nakajima privately. "Do you believe what you wrote in the report?" he asked, "that their approach will prevail over ours?" Nakajima hesitated before answering. "I believe that courage and skill remain vital in aerial combat, Sakai. No mass-produced machine can replace the judgment and instincts of a pilot like you. But I also believe that no amount of courage can overcome a technological gap beyond a certain point." Sakai nodded slowly. "I have seen our newest pilots, Nakajima. Brave young men with 60 hours of flight time, sent against American pilots with 300 hours. Their courage is beyond question, but they die nonetheless." The implications of the Mustang evaluation rippled through the upper echelons of Japanese military leadership in the weeks that followed. The report contributed to several significant decisions, including the acceleration of kamikaze tactics, a desperate attempt to neutralize American material advantages through sacrifice, and the reallocation of increasingly scarce aviation fuel to favor pilot training over conventional operations. By the autumn of 1944, Japanese pilots were encountering Mustangs with increasing frequency, and the performance gap predicted by the evaluation team was fully evident in combat. American bomber formations, once vulnerable when they pushed beyond the range of their escort fighters, now flew with Mustang protection all the way to their targets and back. Commander Nakajima had an opportunity to witness this firsthand in November 1944, when he was assigned as an observer at an air defense base near Tokyo. American B-29 bombers, escorted by Mustangs, attacked aircraft factories in the city. Japanese interceptors struggled to penetrate the protective screen of Mustangs, which operated with a speed and altitude advantage that made traditional interception tactics ineffective. After the raid, Nakajima spoke with several pilots who had engaged the Americans. Their experiences validated the evaluation team's assessments months earlier. "They controlled the engagement from the beginning," one pilot reported. "When we attempted to climb to their altitude, they would dive on us from above. When we tried to lure them into turning fights, they would refuse and maintain their energy advantage." Another pilot added, "Their communication was superior. They operated as coordinated teams while we struggled to maintain formation cohesion, and their endurance, they remained over the target area for nearly 40 minutes before departing, still with fuel to return to their bases." This last point particularly concerned Nakajima. The evaluation team had correctly identified the Mustang's range as its most strategically significant advantage, but seeing it demonstrated operationally brought home the full implications. No target in Japan was now beyond the reach of American air power. As winter approached, Lieutenant Sakagawa was reassigned to the Nakajima aircraft factory to assist with production improvements. The facility was attempting to increase output of the Ki-84 Hayate, one of Japan's few fighters that could approach the Mustang's performance. What he found there further confirmed the evaluation team's conclusions about industrial capacity. The factory had been designed to produce approximately 250 aircraft per month, but had never achieved half that number due to material shortages, precision tool limitations, and skilled labor scarcity. By comparison, North American Aviation's facilities in the United States were producing over 700 Mustangs monthly by late 1944. Sakagawa implemented several production improvements, based on what he had observed in the Mustang's construction. Standardizing fasteners, simplifying wire routing, and modifying assembly sequences yielded modest gains, but the fundamental limitations remained. Without the advanced machine tools and abundant raw materials available to American manufacturers, Japanese production could not significantly increase. In a letter to Nakajima in December 1944, Sakagawa wrote, "We are attempting to compete with industrial giants while equipped with cottage industry tools. The skilled workers here perform near miracles daily, but they cannot overcome the basic mathematical reality. Our production capacity for advanced aircraft is approximately 1/15 that of the Americans, and this ratio worsens each month." Captain Gender, meanwhile, had been reassigned to air defense planning at Imperial headquarters. His experience with the Mustang evaluation profoundly influenced his strategic thinking. In a controversial memo circulated among senior staff, he argued that Japan should conserve its remaining air strength rather than committing to decisive battle, preserving aircraft and pilots for the defense of the home islands. "We must recognize," he wrote, "that our current aircraft production cannot replace losses at the rate they are occurring. Every aircraft and experienced pilot we lose in peripheral operations represents an irreplaceable reduction in our defensive capability." This advice, though strategically sound, ran counter to traditional Japanese military doctrine, which emphasized offensive action and decisive battle. It was largely disregarded, resulting in the commitment of significant air resources to operations in the Philippines, where hundreds of aircraft and pilots were lost in battles they could not win. By early 1945, the strategic situation had deteriorated exactly as the evaluation team had predicted. American bombing raids against Japanese industrial targets increased in frequency and intensity, with Mustang-escorted B-29 formations operating with near impunity. Japanese interceptors continued to fight bravely, but were increasingly overwhelmed by superior numbers of technologically advanced aircraft. In February 1945, Nakajima, now promoted to captain, was summoned to Imperial headquarters to contribute to a comprehensive reassessment of air defense strategy. The meeting included several officers who had participated in or witnessed the Mustang evaluation the previous year. "Our predictions have proven accurate," Nakajima stated during the meeting. "The Americans now have complete air superiority over our territory. Their technological advantage, particularly with the Mustang, has combined with their industrial capacity to create an imbalance we cannot overcome with current resources." Admiral Oikawa, who had questioned Nakajima's assessment at the demonstration months earlier, now acknowledged the accuracy of the evaluation team's predictions. "What options remain to us?" he asked. The discussion that followed was somber. Conservation of remaining aircraft and pilots for homeland defense, dispersal of industrial facilities to reduce vulnerability to bombing, increased emphasis on kamikaze tactics. These were the diminishing options available to a nation losing the capacity to conduct conventional air operations. As the meeting concluded, Admiral Oikawa took Nakajima aside. "Your evaluation of the Mustang was prescient," he said quietly. "Had we fully appreciated its implications earlier, different decisions might have been made." Nakajima simply nodded, understanding that such admissions were as close as the High Command would come to acknowledging the fundamental miscalculations that had led to the current situation. In the final months of the war, the lessons of the Mustang evaluation influenced Japanese planning in various ways. Aircraft were increasingly dispersed and camouflaged to protect them from American attacks. Production focused on simple, easily manufactured designs that could be built in small workshops less vulnerable to bombing. Training programs were modified to emphasize specific tactics for countering high-performance American fighters. These adaptations, while logical, came too late to alter the war's outcome. The industrial and technological gap identified by the evaluation team in June 1944 had only widened in the intervening months. Lieutenant Sakai, who survived the war to become one of Japan's most famous aviation figures, later wrote about the psychological impact of encountering aircraft like the Mustang. "We had begun the war believing our aircraft and pilots were superior to any in the world. By 1944, we faced the reality that our opponents had not only caught up, but had surpassed us decisively. For pilots trained to believe in their inherent advantage, this realization was perhaps more damaging than the technical disadvantages themselves. In the decades following the war, Japanese industry would embrace and ultimately perfect the mass production techniques and quality control systems they had first glimpsed in that captured Mustang. The methodical attention to detail, the pursuit of manufacturing efficiency, and the integration of advanced technology would become hallmarks of Japanese industrial culture, transforming the nation into an economic powerhouse. The lessons learned from examining the P-51 Mustang, that industrial capacity combined with technological excellence creates an unbeatable advantage, would shape not only Japan's post-war development, but also influence military procurement and planning around the world for generations to come. For the evaluation team, who stood on that tarmac in Yokosuka in June 1944, the Mustang represented more than just an advanced aircraft. It was a glimpse into a new era of warfare, one where the factory became as decisive as the battlefield, where production lines determined outcomes as surely as front lines, and where industrial might would increasingly dictate military possibility. In a final irony, many of the Japanese aviation experts who had examined the Mustang would go on to help rebuild Japan's post-war aviation industry, applying the lessons they had learned from American aircraft to create companies that would eventually compete successfully in the global marketplace. Captain Nakajima, in his last official report before Japan's surrender, offered a fitting epitaph for the era. The examination of the P-51 Mustang revealed to us not merely an aircraft, but a different conception of modern warfare, one in which industrial capacity, technical standardization, and resource availability proved more decisive than individual skill or fighting spirit. This lesson, though learned at great cost, must guide our future endeavors if we are to rebuild our nation in the post-war world. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.